like to think that whatever happens in the future with the post office will be reasonably secure. My concern really is for more of the rural areas. So in the post office debate that we had, the post office couldn't give us an answer, or couldn't give me an answer on what level does a service stop being sustainable, because the report talks about financially responsible services. So when they start making big losses, they'll shut services, and they'll be responsive to the demand in the area, and they will probably replace what we currently have with what they're calling access points, which could be a proper post office, it could be a kiosk.
This was going to be one of the points I was going to make. Shouldn't this have really been brought up and answered in the debate?
Absolutely it should have. And so this was during the debate. I did ask this question a number of times to try and get an answer on what is the minimum number of services. If something isn't financially profitable, will they keep running some of these services? And the answer was that they couldn't answer that question. But on top of that, obviously, we have the My Card issue at the moment. It's been extended until, I think, 2022. But there is concern about what happens after 2022. So there is a risk here that as a combination of factors all happen at the same time, and we end up with areas that maybe you can't go to the local post office and get your pension collected for whatever reason. And I'm talking here about after 2022. I'm talking longer term here. And so the question is, if this might happen, well, what plans are in place to try and mitigate that and make sure that after this plan starts kicking in, and maybe after these things start kicking in, how can people in these areas still get access to cash pensions or My Card pensions if they want to? And it all ties in with that digitally excluded, if you don't have a bank account or if you don't want a direct debit, how are we going to keep providing services for that ever-decreasing proportion of our population?
Do you feel that the social element of the post office was taken into account enough during the debate?
No, I don't, and that's kind of the point that a number of us, I think, tried to make.
But that's the trap they're in, isn't it? They're being asked on one hand to be profitable, and on the other hand, withdrawing those services has an implication socially, but will help them be profitable.
Yeah, and this was a point I made a number of times in the debate, was we need to stop seeing the post office as being responsible for these services, and we need to look at them more as a service vehicle. That's how Treasury is delivering its service, and really it's government's job to deal with the social policy implications of some of these changes, not the post office's job. And the post office have been put in this really difficult situation where they've been asked by the Council of Ministers to try and deal with all of these issues, when really it should have been the Council of Ministers that grasped some of the social policy issues and dealt with them before asking the post office to try and become more financially responsible, more financially sustainable. And that hasn't happened. And that's really the problem. It's a horrible place the post office have been put in, and I've said as much during the debate that they should not have been put in that position, but they were put in that position. And so here we are. They've made decisions which are in their financial best interest, which is absolutely their responsibility.
And that's what they were asked to report on.
Absolutely. And so they've done exactly what it is they should have done. But the problem is when you're just looking at the bottom line, you do risk losing some of that wider context, that wider social policy context. And I'm not satisfied, I'm not convinced government has been quick enough picking up that side of things.
Let's move to the railways. And you're asking for the Minister to report on a Tynwald policy decision from 2008.
Yes, so back in 2008 there was a Tynwald report, and it said we should investigate the possibility of more commuter rail travel on the island. So actually using our railways, the steam railway and the electric railway, as commuter vehicles to get in and out of work. Seemed to make a lot of sense 11 years ago. The DOI actually never reported back on that. So here we are 11 years later, and they still haven't reported. So their response to this is, we're going to report in 2019.
Has this been brought about by Bill Shimon's suggestion of using one of the tracks on the MER, getting rid of it and having a cycling and a walking path?
Absolutely. There's an element of that for me, because I think there is a real desire to want to keep some of these heritage railway services as they are, which is fine. But if we have a service, we have the infrastructure there, well, can we make better use of it? Can we make more use of it? So in this climate-conscious age where we're trying to get people out of cars and onto electric forms of transport, surely it makes sense to investigate, well, actually, if we put a proper electric tram on the MER at certain times of the day to help people get in and out of work, half-hour, 45-minute journey, would people use that? Has that been considered as a possibility? Rather than talking about let's scrap some of the route, let's get rid of it, shouldn't we be looking at saying, well, we have the railway in place, we have most of the infrastructure in place, should we not invest a little bit more in some of these services and make them more usable for people?
Are you using thinking of the steam railway as well?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm not sure how viable that route particularly would be. I mean, I know they have a diesel locomotive. I'm not sure whether you can
That
get...
wasn't the best recommendation, was
No,
it, for
no.
this sort of service?
No, but I think it is the kind of thing that the DOI need to be thinking about. They're supposed to have laid an integrated transport strategy in front of Tynwald already. They haven't yet done that. So I'm hoping they will be able to take this into account when they're developing that strategy to say, right, okay, we have some pretty good, pretty effective railways already. How can we see if we can get people to use them more in a day-to-day context, not just as a tourism facility, actually use it as a commuter facility as well?
You'd use that all year round?
I don't see why not. I think as long as it's viable and it's going to not create too much of a loss, then why wouldn't you? I mean, the buses for those commuter times tend to be quite full, so surely there is an appetite there for people to use public transport when it's fast, when it's efficient, when it's modern, and so that is something I think that the DOI need to be looking at investing in.